and unapologetic. Welcome to Men Talking Mindfulness with your hosts John McCaskill and Will Schneider. Here we focus on helping men and those with men in their lives solve some of life's complex challenges through understanding the practices of mindfulness and how they can help. Each episode is in an environment free of judgment and criticism, with a focus on authenticity and inner peace. Let's dig in.
A person isn't who they are during the last conversation you had with them. They're who they've been throughout your whole relationship. That's Rainier Marie Rilke. That's a quote, right? A person isn't who they are during the last conversation you had with them. They're who they've been throughout your whole relationship. So relationships can be tricky. So today we thought we should shed some light on them and learn about toxic relationships, what they are, how to identify them, and what you can do to change them. Welcome back, everybody, to Men Talking Mindfulness, where my co-host John McCaskill over there in Colorado Springs and myself in New York City break down an aspect of mindfulness and make it meaningful to you. And today, that's why you have the big fire background here. Toxic relationships. All right. And I think another quote, and we've said it many, many times on the show, is Dr. Rob Kelly, who's been a 2-time guest on our show. He goes, "You show me your friends and I'll show your future." That's how important the relationships and the people and the influence that you have in your life that you continually access and surround yourself with have and determine a lot of who you are, what you're doing right now, and where you're not being or where you are going because of your relationship. So, John, welcome back to the show. Always great to see you.
Great to be here, brother. Thank you for that intro. And just going to cover a couple of announcements. I'll do it real briefly. One, YouTube. You can check us out on there. It's super easy these days. All you have to do is go on YouTube and type in the @ symbol, and then Men Talking Mindfulness. So @ and Men Talking Mindfulness. Check us out. We'd love for you to follow us there. Hit that little bell to make sure that you get notified when new content comes out. It's not just the show that we put out. We put out a lot of other content on there too. Next one is that we have the dates set for our next mindfulness adventure retreat. And this time it's on the East Coast. So save the date, May 18th through the 21st of 2023. We've got the East Coast, upstate New York mindfulness adventure retreat. And Will's been out there. He sent us pictures of this location. I can't wait to get out there. It's going to be a retreat for us as well while we're there. So we're very much looking forward to that. And then lastly, Will is offering a weekly Wednesday midweek refresh on Insight Timer. Insight Timer is a meditation and mindfulness app that's out there. Check that app out. We both have content on there, but Will is specifically doing a midweek refresh sesh at 6:30 p.m. Eastern. It's just 30 minutes, and that's every Wednesday. You don't have to know how to meditate. You don't have to be experienced. You just show up. Will walk you through that and kind of get you spun up on how to do this midweek refresh. That is on Insight Timer, but you follow Will on Instagram to get some more details on that. And then you can follow us both on Insight Timer. All right, that all said, let's get into that 5-breath kind of reset or a grounding practice. So for those who are listening, for those who are watching, thank you. And now get into a position that is both safe and comfortable for you, whatever that may look like, whatever that may feel like. And then just bring your attention very intentionally to your breath, paying attention intentionally to your breath, what that feels like, what it sounds like, and all the other aspects, the physical aspects of that breath. And to really highlight that attention, force our attention in a way to our breath, we're going to do 5 intentional grounding breaths. Begin by breathing out as much air as you can, emptying your lungs, holding empty at the bottom. Deep breath in through your nose, filling from the bottom to the top, holding at the top, and release, 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 empty, 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 holding empty at the bottom, filling up from the bottom, deep breath in, all the way to the top, hold at the top, and release, 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 nice and slow, letting it all go empty, 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 holding empty at the bottom, Deep breath in, filling again from the bottom to the top, holding full at the top and letting it go, letting it go, letting it go, emptying all the way out, holding empty at the bottom. 2 more. Deep breath in through your nose, noticing how your breath is coming into your body, filling up, and hold and relax, relax, relax. 1 more. Deep breath in, filling all the way up, all the way. 1 more sip, hold, and release. Release, and start to bring that movement into your body, micro movements, neck, shoulders, fingers. And here we are. Let's talk about some toxic relationships. Will.
Yeah. Hey, the more we continue to do this show, John, those grounding 5 breaths are just so important to open up the mind, open up the ears, so you can really listen and receive. But it's also like, God, if you're in a situation where, you're dealing with a difficult person, taking those breaths can really make a big difference in what you do next. Right.
Yeah.
A big difference. That's why we kind of always do these breathings, because it really just becomes a foundation of life, not just a foundation of our show.
Right.
So how about, let's define toxic. I thought it'd be good.
Yeah.
Right? 'Cause I think we know what relationships are, right? Like being and dealing
Yeah.
with another person. A toxic, I thought, was a very interesting word. And it's defined as very harmful or unpleasant in a pervasive or insidious way. That's what toxic is, right? Very harmful or unpleasant in a pervasive or insidious way. And even in the dictionary, they go on to quote a toxic relationship, right? But I thought insidious was really interesting too. Defining insidious, proceeding in a gradual, subtle way, but with harmful effects, right? So it just like, so it's not, the toxic relationship is just one and done. It's slowly, gradual, subtle way with harmful effects.
You may not see it as toxic right off the bat.
Yeah, exactly. It could be a very slow decline, or negativity, more toxicity. So,
before we get much further, I just want to bring in the last episode that we did on self-compassion, and how in Kristen Neff's book, she actually talks about toxic relationships and how a lot of the time, if we beat ourselves up, so the opposite of self-compassion, that self-flagellation that we talked about, a lot of the time we actually seek out these toxic relationships because they reinforce what we already believe about ourselves, the negative things that we already believe about ourselves. We don't deserve, we feel that we don't deserve, we think that we don't deserve any better. And we actually intentionally seek out these toxic relationships. So you got to be aware of, 1, what they are, and then 2, are you in fact actively seeking these out? And if so, why? Maybe that's tied to that lack of self-compassion. So maybe if that is in fact where you find yourself, go back and listen to that last episode on self-compassion, how to develop that, and what it is, what it is, and then and maybe you can help yourself out of that kind of self flagellating cycle that you're in. So,
and also I think it comes down to self-worth as well. Know that you are valuable, know that you have gifts, know that you have a unique contribution that you can bring to the world. And if you're in a toxic relationship and surrounded by a lot of negative influences, I've been in those relationships, John, and I still have some of those in my life that I work very hard in order to mitigate and minimize and kind of, find a way to, when I am around these kind of relationships, finding a way to just, and honestly, a lot of breathing to keep my mouth shut, a lot of munching on my lip, instead of to keep my mouth shut, because I'm trying not to engage in the toxicity, because then I start to fuel and fill up with like fucking negativity, and I can get really critical and very assholey and fucking very mean if I go into that space, because it just unlocks a part of myself that I probably was doing too much of in the past in some ways.
Right.
So
yeah, man. And we we can find ourselves in those relationships. And sometimes, I mean, admittedly, sometimes we are the toxic one, and we have to be
No
aware of
shit, right?
that too, right?
Yeah.
And you
Yeah.
just talked about being assholey, or I forget what term you used, but sometimes if you are aware and you notice, you're like, oh, wait a minute, I'm the toxic one here. So there's really two sides to the coin. Obviously, in a relationship, there's one of the person that is in that toxic relationship, and then the other person is the toxic piece of that relationship, and you have to be aware. And sometimes that could even go back and forth. Sometimes you are the toxic one, and sometimes you are the one that is in the toxic relationship. So I think it's important to know that. And then what makes a relationship toxic? Like, okay, so yes, you defined it very harmful or unpleasant in a pervasive or insidious way.
Right.
That's the definition, right? But really, what makes a relationship toxic? It's not always active. Maybe it's some passive aggressiveness or passive toxicity in your relationship. So let's talk about that a little bit.
We're going to go. Yeah, I have a whole list here that I pulled from a good source online. One thing that's come up for me, John, is like, are you building someone up, or at least holding someone in a loving and kind way, or are you tearing them down?
Yeah.
Right. You know what I mean? And I think that's a very simple distinction, but it's like, and if you're tearing people down, then you're creating, toxicity in that relationship, but you're also, what the fuck is going on the inside that you feel you need to tear somebody else down?
Yeah. Right? I think probably a lot of it comes from narcissism, right? If you are in a relationship with a narcissist, you are most likely in a toxic relationship. And I know we're going to go through the notes here, but as I was reading through the notes, I was like, well, a lot of this is tied to narcissism. So let's go through that list.
We'll dive in here. This, like, let me just note that what I'm going to read next is, it reveals it is more with romantic relationships and spouses and stuff like that, but it still relates to other relationships as well.
Sure.
So the first one is lack of support. Healthy relationships are based on a mutual desire to see the other succeed in all areas of life. But when things turn toxic, every achievement becomes a competition. You don't feel supported or encouraged, and you can't trust them to show up for you. Instead, you might get the impression that your needs your needs and interests don't matter, and that they only care about what they want. That comes back to that narcissism. So lack of support, right? If you don't feel support in your relationship, you might be in a toxic relationship in some ways. How about this one? I'll read a few of these, John. You can read one.
Yeah,
You read them.
Sounds good.
So toxic communication. Instead of kindness and mutual respect, most of your conversations are filled with sarcasm or criticism and fueled by contempt. Contempt. Yeah. So that's another one. Toxic communication. Are you receiving love and kindness and support, right? Or mutual respect, or is your conversations, sarcasm, criticism, all the stuff that comes along with that? Envy or jealousy. Does your partner or friend ask where you are all the time? Maybe they become annoyed or irritated when you don't immediately answer text, or text you again and again until you do. These behaviors might stem from jealousy or lack of trust, but they can also suggest a need for control, back to that narcissism, both of which can contribute to relationship toxicity. In some cases, these attempts at control can also suggest abuse, which, is another kind of, I guess, when toxic relationships get really, really ugly, abuse can kind of begin to take hold. Resentment. So this is another aspect of toxic relationship. Resentment, holding on to grudges and letting them fester. They also chip away at intimacy when they do that as well. How about the rest? Anything for those first four, John, that are kind of speaking to you?
They all speak to me. Absolutely. Yeah. I've been in toxic relationships, and again, I've probably been the toxic one in some relationships. But now that I practice mindfulness and I'm more aware, I can make my own changes on both sides of that relationship. But continuing through the list, we've talked about resentment. Holding on to grudges and letting them fester chips away at intimacy. Dishonesty. You find yourself constantly making up lies about your whereabouts or who you meet up with. So you are trying to cover up this because you already see that other person as jealous, right? So envious. Lying. And we talked about, you start lying to them to protect yourself from that outburst of control or that abuse even. So
Yeah.
you are being dishonest. If you find yourself
Mm.
being dishonest to cover your tracks, then you're probably in some level of toxic relationship.
Yeah.
There's a pattern of disrespect, being chronically late. So this other person is chronically late, casually forgetting about events, quote unquote forgetting, and other behaviors that show disrespect for your time. So they are disrespecting your time. And I would say even further, your time, your energy, they disrespect you as a person. They basically view you as an object in their life. You are objectified by them. Ignoring your needs, going along with whatever your partner wants to do, even when it goes against your wishes or comfort level. That's a sure sign of toxicity, lost relationships. You've stopped spending time with friends and family. Like, you've either done that actively or they've cut them off. They've forced you to cut them off. I know some people who are in my life right now who have been cut off from me, been cut off from other members of my family and friends circles because of a controlling, toxic person in their lives, which, that's painful for everyone. But there's and that's fear-based on the person being toxic, right? So they fear potential loss. So that's, narcissism is probably a foundation for a lot of toxic relationships, but also fear. Like, if you can see that they fear loss, there may be potential for toxicity in the relationship. Not always. I mean, fear of loss is a human thing, but when they take that fear of loss and they activate it to making you separate yourself from your friends, your family, your colleagues, because they feel that those people are going to steal you away, then that's a toxic relationship. So yeah, man. And real quick, I just want to cover that this is from healthline.com. And this is Cindy Lamoth, I believe it's pronounced, Cindy Lamoth. This is her list of signs of toxic relationships. A lot of the stuff that we provide on the show, is obviously not our own content, but we pull it and we provide it to you guys as a resource, because sometimes you're not going to take the time to look this up. You may not. So we want to be that resource for you. So I want to make sure we give credit where credit is due. So that's healthline.com, and the author is Cindy Lamoth. So sorry, man.
No apologies. I think it's like, and we also want to be helpful. Like, we want, we want to give whoever's listening a little nugget that they can hopefully incorporate in their life in some way and make a change. Right. I mean, it's all started one little dominoes, one little change, or next little change. What I'm also hearing, or what I'm feeling, is this need for in a toxic relationship, the need to control everything. I think we need to do an episode on that. We'll do an episode on controlling controlling people. It's like, because it's like, it's a weakness. That's not the word I want to use. It's like, it's a fear. That's what you said earlier. It's a fear of like, without mindset. Scarcity mindset, without control, or without you controlling or putting your footprint and fingerprint and approval on everything. That's like, it's just fear instead of being in the moment, going with the flow, taking things as they come. And there's obviously a need, John, to lead and not control, but I mean, to make a decision and move in a certain direction, but also with a sense of flexibility and a sense of like, we'll arrive at the next moment when the next moment comes, instead of trying to control every single moment. And I think, the more I kind of talk about it, it's like, that's so much of this toxic relationship, because if you're not getting control, then what are you doing? You're going to tear somebody down. You're going to pick somebody apart. You're going to speak to them in a negative way in order to defeat them, right? In some ways, or deflate them, so they just give up, right? So you can be in control.
And I want to touch on real quick, since you brought up control specifically, the note that we have here about abuse. So, taking this toxic relationship to the next level, if you will, obviously a negative next level, abuse, on the other hand, so compared to a toxic relationship, stems from a desire to hold power over someone and control their behavior. And according to the National Domestic Violence Hotline, since abuse often happens gradually in subtle ways, you may not always recognize it easily, especially if the relationship has been toxic for some time. And that can be physical abuse, but there are other forms of abuse, emotional abuse, right? Verbal abuse, controlling the finances and income, controlling
Gaslighting.
the ability to maybe travel, like taking away somebody's passport, or like there's other forms of abuse, and we have to be aware of that. And we have to also, I want to make sure that we're talking about toxic relationships here. And I think abuse is definitely a level of toxic. It is just the next level. And you just have to be aware that a lot of the time, toxic relationships can become abusive. So I just wanted to mention that when we're talking about control.
Yeah, and if you're in one of those relationships, you got to stand up for yourself. Like
Yeah.
you got it, and that's not easy a lot of times, especially if somebody is maybe intimidating with a big booming voice or something like that, or particular stature, or we'll get into the kind of office toxic relationships here in a moment. Professional toxic relationships in the professional world is what I mean. Toxic relationships, but maybe somebody is like your boss or your manager or somebody higher up the pecking order within your organization. It's just like what do you
Right.
do in those particular circumstances?
With regards to coming back to the abuse, after I said the abuse, you're like, well, you got to get out of it. Well, a lot of the time that's easily said, but not so easily done, because you may be in a relationship where you have children involved. You may be in a relationship where you have some type of codependency, where you do depend on this other person for income, or maybe they are the quote unquote breadwinner in the family. And if you leave this relationship, then you're going to be, or at least you may envision yourself out on the streets without a home. So, it's easy to sit here and say,
of course,
that, hey, get out of an abusive relationship. But a lot of the time it's more complicated than that. But that's not what this episode is about. This episode is actually taking it down a notch from the abusive relationships into the toxic side. And that we want to make sure we give you some tools to be aware of those toxic relationships, and then a tool to get out of those toxic relationships if in fact that's where you want to be. So all right, where do we want to take it from here, man?
Let me should we have a little bit more information here on how to handle toxic relationships.
Let's do it.
So maybe we can do into that. And this is by Kristen Carter on mindful.org. When a relationship is causing you stress and suffering, follow these 5 steps to find peace of mind. Bingo. Right. If you too have struggled with toxic relationships, I hope this little instruction manual will help you. Okay. Number 1, I'll do number 1. Accept that you are in a difficult situation, dealing with a very difficult relationship. So first is accept, just like we talked about. It's like that's where it all starts. And being aware, first thing, it's no wonder why it's from mindful.org. Being aware of the situation that you're in and the relationship that you're in. Your choices here are fairly limited, and strangely, acceptance is always the best choice. You can judge and criticize the other person, but that will probably make you feel tense and lonely. Alternately, you could nurse your anxiety and despair that you'll never be able to you can nurse your anxiety and despair that you'll never be able to get along with them, which will make you feel stressed and sad. You can definitely deny their existence or pretend that they aren't bothering you, and you can block their texts and emails and avoid every situation where they're turning up. Okay, what am I missing here, John? I think this is
that's everything that you could do, right? But that's not the acceptance. So that's the exact opposite of acceptance.
Okay,
that is resistance, and none of that is going to protect you. So it goes on there with, ironically, these tactics will allow the other person to further embed themselves into your psyche. So like, okay, you're blocking the text, you're blocking the emails, you're intentionally avoiding them. Well, now you're avoiding places that you may run into them. So in a weird way, that's controlling. They're in your psyche. Like, okay, why are you not going to this particular restaurant? Why are you not Why are you not going to this particular
They're
gym?
still controlling you, right?
They are controlling you indirectly. So that resistance is actually letting them further embed themselves into your psyche. So what does work is the opposite of the resistance, is accepting you are in fact in a toxic relationship. And then this gentle acceptance does not mean that you are resigned to a life of misery or that the situation will never get better. Maybe it will, maybe it won't. And again, this is a quote from Christine Carter from mindful.org, the different ways that you can get out of or manage a toxic relationship. So you accept the reality of a difficult relationship, allows us to soften. And here's the big piece.
All right.
This softening will open the door to your own what? Compassion, right? So we talked about compassion last week, and specifically self-compassion. And then she goes on, trust me, you are going to need those things, the compassion and wisdom. So that's why she talks about acceptance. And she initially covers the opposite of that, is the resistance, right? But then she goes into why the acceptance is so important. So going to number 2 for you, man.
Okay, the other person, sorry, God, I gotta slow down. The other person will probably tell you that you are the cause of their bad feelings. Of all their bad feelings. The other person will probably tell you that you are the cause of all their bad feelings. This is not true. You are not responsible for their emotions. You never have been, and you never will be. Don't take responsibility for their suffering. If you do, they will never have the opportunity to take responsibility for themselves. Wow. So there again. So I guess, staying on your side. So don't be, I mean, don't put up with their bullshit, I guess. It's just like, it's like, I feel the toxic relationship, the person that is being toxic is just almost putting on some sort of costume, right? Some sort of like, a monster costume or something like that, or bad, you know what I mean? Because it's just like they're hiding behind something, right? They're hiding within something and behind something, and like, and
they're scared.
They're fucking, there you go. Thank you. You
They're
just
scared.
really, wow. They're scared. They're fear. They're scared.
They're scared of admitting that they have a flaw. They're scared of admitting that they themselves are the reason for their own emotions. They're scared. That's what it is.
And maybe with people like that in your life, John, then bring compassion. Like if you can identify somebody that is scared like this, it's just like, wow, like that's, that's,
what are they scared
I'm
of?
sorry. Right. Yeah. Who knows? Right. What's the unmet need?
Yeah.
Right. And a lot of the unmet needs that happen in the world, just to be seen, just to be heard, just to be accepted, just to be loved, just to be appreciated, just to be respected, and it's like, and maybe, you can change in that moment, you can change that relationship really quickly by I don't know,
even take it further.
You
could not just change that relationship, but you could ultimately change that person for the better. And then the rest of the relationships that they are in could become less toxic. So, if you're in a romantic relationship with someone and you see that there's fear there, and you are compassionate with them, and you understand that, and you accept them, and you, and I'm not saying that you need to accept every single toxic relationship that you're in, but it could be a helpful tool. But you could, in fact, help this person realize that they are being toxic, maybe not call them out for being toxic, but help them realize that they have some challenges that they can overcome. And then if they do in fact overcome those challenges, then they can be a better friend with other people. They can be a better colleague in their professional settings. So you potentially changing your relationship could potentially change that person, which could potentially change other relationships that they are in. So I think that's an important piece to realize is bringing that compassion into the relationship.
Yeah. And I actually have, I'll mention after we kind of go through this a little bit, there's from the CCARES course again that I'm taking, or I have taken, depend on when you're listening to this podcast. There's actually some ways to kind of address that, that is non-threatening, but also standing up for yourself. So you want to tell the truth, John?
Yeah. So, we talked about identifying ways to identify. We walked through a list of like things that you could use to identify that you are in a toxic relationship. And one of them is lying. So why do you lie? So the flip side of that is tell the truth. So a lot of the time you're lying to avoid upsetting the other person. You become complicit complicit in the creation and maintenance of their reality, which is poisonous to you. So tell the truth. For example, they might ask if you forgot to invite them to a party. And you can easily say, yes, it was a mistake, and that they didn't get the evite, or did you check your spam folder, or whatever. Lying is stressful for human beings, maybe the most stressful thing. Lie detectors detect not lies, but they detect the stress and fear that lying is causing. This will not make the relationship any less toxic. So instead, tell the truth. Be sure to tell them your truth instead of your judgment or what you imagine to be true for other people. Don't say, I didn't invite you because it would stress mom out too much to have you there, or I didn't invite you because you are a manipulative drama queen who will find some way to make the evening about you. Instead, tell them your truth. Okay, so here, coming back to that example, here's your truth in that example. Tell them this. When you are in my home, I feel jittery and nervous, and I can't relax. So I'm sorry, but I didn't invite you to the party. I'm sorry that I've hurt your feelings. Now, that is going to hurt their feelings, but it's also going to change their reality. Rather than creating and maintaining this false reality for them, now you're actually telling them the truth, and now that's going to change their perception of themselves, and maybe they're going to become less toxic. So it takes that courage to tell that truth, but it often makes people angry, but they will probably be mad at you anyway, no matter what you do. So might as well do the good thing, the right thing, and tell them the truth. So there you go. Tell the truth.
They're probably just angry at themselves in some ways, and now they're just making it toxic for everybody.
Yep.
Wow, that's a lot, and I really like the beginning.
And you know that the side, the side aspect is, hey, if they've been a toxic jerk to you this whole time, and you tell them that, they may not want to hang out with you anymore, and boom, you're out of the relationship.
Yeah, you're free. You're free.
Right.
I thought it in the beginning, when you lie, perhaps to avoid upsetting them, you become complicit in the creation and maintenance of their reality, which is poisonous to you. So you're actually, again, they're controlling you by you lying, because you don't want to upset them. You don't want to control them. So it's just like, wow. I mean, it's like, I'm feeling,
you're just propagating it, right? For others. So now they go into other relationships with this reality that you helped to create and maintain, and now they're going into other relationships still believing that about themselves. But if you reverse that, you kind of put a stop to that reality, you're saving others, and you're saving them from being toxic in other relationships.
It's true, and you're saving your future from or your time from future distress by getting out of this and being honest. And it's like, wow. I mean, how
right.
Wow. I mean, as I'm reading this, I'm like, oh my God, I start to calcify in some ways. I'm like, oh, I get angry. I get rageful like the fire. But then we talk about what can relieve us. I was like, oh man, that'd be so nice just to kind of, tell the truth and, let them know, how they're making you feel, not telling them that that they're making you feel this way, but like how I'm feeling because of the way that they're showing up. So it's like, wow.
So, so let's talk about that anger, right? So that's number 4 in this list.
Okay.
If you feel angry, you want to take that one?
Yeah. If you feel angry or afraid, bring your attention to your breath and do not speak or write to the person until you feel calm. Right. I mean, that's huge. I don't think a lot of people get this. Like, maybe it's a hard lesson. Like, it's taken me a long time to not respond emotionally. That's another way of saying this. Do not respond emotionally, and
don't react.
Yeah. Don't react. Yeah, exactly. Don't react emotionally, and don't react at all until you don't have those emotions. You have a clear mind, a clear objective view of the situation, and then you can engage once again. I mean, that's really, really important. So it's normal to
connect with. Sent us this great, I think it was a meme, or maybe it was a LinkedIn post, where it says if you stare at a pot of boiling water, you cannot see your reflection, right? And the metaphor there is that when you calm that boiling water down, and now you can look at it when it's cool and it's just still, you can see your reflection. Well, that is us. When we are that boiling pot, we can't even see ourselves, and we act outside of our normal ways of being. So rather than acting in that boiling moment, in that moment of anger or
The
fear.
fire.
Yeah, we're basically on fire,
Rage.
like the
Yeah.
background here, right?
All right.
We are on
Right.
fire and we act outside of our normal ways.
Yeah.
Calm yourself down, excuse yourself, and yeah, I'll let you take it from here.
No,
But
and
I
it's
just wanted
fine
to
because
cover that meme. I thought it was perfect.
no, I love it. Yeah, it's so true. It's normal to want to defend yourself, but remember that anger and anxiety weaken you. Okay? Remember that anger and anxiety weaken you. Trust that soothing yourself is the only effective thing you can do right now. And you need to, if you need to excuse yourself, go right ahead, step out, even if it's embarrassing, or it leaves people hanging. I mean, it's like, at least even in that moment, John, if like, I'm really getting rageful for someone, whatever, spilling ignorance or trying to like spill their ignorance on me or trying to make me feel or control me in ways. Like just even that act of like leaving the fucking room without even responding, like that says something, a tremendous amount, without even saying a word.
Right?
Right.
Oh,
I mean,
that's
that just
huge.
kind of puts everybody on notice
Yeah.
in some way. It's like, oh, what? We're not going to put up with this charade anymore. We're not going to, you know what I mean? Like, the asshole isn't going to get his way again.
Right.
Right. So, that's a real powerful movement, like a real powerful action, taking yourself out. So,
Yeah.
love it. Love it. Keep going, John.
Yeah. So the last one that we have is have mercy. So Anne Lamott defines mercy as radical kindness bolstered by forgiveness, and it allows us to alter a communication dynamic, even when we are interacting with someone mired in anger or fear or jealousy. We do this by offering them a gift from our heart. You probably won't be able to get rid of your negative thoughts about them, and you won't be able to change them, but you can make an effort to be a loving person. Can you buy them a cup of coffee? Can you hold space for their suffering? Again, we talked about a lot of this comes from their fear, their pain, their angst, their jealousy. So can you hold space for their suffering? Because that's what all those are. Those are forms of suffering. Can you send a loving kindness meditation their way? Right? That's if you've done loving kindness meditation, a lot of the time you start by envisioning someone that you love, right? And you send them loving kindness. You send them, you want to take away their pain, their suffering, and you send them joy. And then you kind of envision someone of neutral who you don't really have feelings for. And that's kind of easy to send them that loving kindness. You want to send them the love, the joy, and take away their pain and suffering. And then it goes from there to somebody that you have a challenge with in your life, somebody who you may even have negative feelings for. And that's always the toughest part of these loving kindness meditations. But I would also argue, I think that's the most important part, is that loving kindness meditation, where you're actually sending that loving kindness to someone that you have negative feelings for, because it does so much, not just for them, because it may not do anything for them. I'd like to think that it does, but it really does something for you. And it helps to develop this mercy that I'm talking about. So forgiveness takes this kindness to a whole new level. And then she goes on to say, I used to think I couldn't really forgive someone who had hurt me until they had asked for forgiveness, preferably in the form of a moving and remorseful apology letter. But I've learned that to heal ourselves, we must forgive, whether or not we're asked for forgiveness, and whether or not the person is still hurting us. When we do, we feel happier and more peaceful. And it goes on. I'm not going to read the rest of it, but the bottom line is have that mercy. And she defines, or rather, Anne Lamott defines mercy as that radical kindness bolstered by forgiveness. And you don't have to have them ask for that forgiveness. Give it to them. Give it to them. Because like we've talked about forgiveness on the show before with John Abbott, who was run over, right? Run over as a cyclist, and he forgave the person who ran him over without ever knowing who it was. That person didn't ever come and ask for the forgiveness. He gave the forgiveness, because not forgiving, and I forget who says this, and you may know, Will, not forgiving someone is like drinking poison and hoping that they will die.
Right. Oh, there you go. That's a great point.
It affects you way more than them. So anyway.
It keeps you in the victim. It keeps you in the victim mindset. It's just like, well, it keeps you, in this case, in a relationship with, two people. It's like you're a victim to their fucking toxicity and their bullshit and their need to control things, versus like, and then you're drinking their poison, right? That's what they had said earlier, what toxic is, it's poisonous,
Yep.
versus like disconnecting, forgiving, like being of mercy, right? Kindness and forgiveness is the combination there. And just the moving on from the relationship, and that can be a great way to change that relationship.
Yeah.
For sure. I mean, just again, and this really speaks to having mercy and forgiveness is another way of standing up for yourself,
That's
which
absolutely
is
100%.
a big deal. I mean, that's honestly what a lot of this is coming down to, is standing up for yourself, and don't put up with these toxic relationships, or find a way to get around them. So one way that we can do that, John, is um, it's you can make a request, I think, and there's a couple. You can make like a smart request. So if you're having trouble with somebody, whether it's a personal relationship or an office relationship, um, you can make a smart request. Okay, so a smart request is the language would be, the language is something along the lines of, "Would you be willing to?" and make that
Mm,
request. Right. So that's really powerful, because you're not blaming anybody, right? But you're sticking up for yourself. Would you be willing to and make this request? And the answer in those situations, with the other person in the relationship, could be yes, no, or a counter proposal. Um, even something like, yeah. So then, smart request, and I'll give you an example, or I'll give you a little a script here that you can kind of plug in. Smart request is one that's specific, measurable, SMART, specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and time bound.
so it's like a
So
SMART goal. The
what's
SMART goal.
that?
SMART
Yeah,
goal. If you've heard of SMART goals, SMART, it's the same acronym for
yeah,
SMART goals.
yeah,
I've never heard that tied to a SMART request. I love it. Bringing that
yeah.
SMART acronym into this.
Yeah, well, I mean, I had, I had a situation, where, someone was like filming me without like taking pictures or videos without me even knowing. And I was like, I felt kind of disrespected and a little offended. It's like, yeah, you got to tell me that you're fucking taking videos and shit. Like, that's like not
Well, dude, I
cool,
mean, look at you. Why would they not want to?
Yeah, well, that's a good point, John. Very good point. Now I just feel better about the whole thing. Thank you very much. Uh, so, so this is the prescription, right? And uh, so when this, so here it is. So when this, happened, so this is me speaking to the person. So when this have the date happened, I felt triggered, and I realized that I have a need for blank, right? Would you be willing to, this is the request, willing to blank and make the request, right? So, hey, when you were filming me without me knowing, I felt triggered, and I realized that I have a need for respect. Would you
Mm,
be willing to let me know before you film me next time, please? Right to the heart,
nice.
right?
Yeah,
Right from the heart, right? I'm standing up for myself. I'm not trying to, defend, or, not trying to like diminish them in any way. I'm only standing my ground in this case.
right.
And it's very clear too. It's a very clear request. And again, they just say yes, no, or counter proposal. And, whatever that next step is, or that after that, you saying that, is what the next moment is. Um, so that could be a great way to begin to stand up for yourself, and with language, instead of, because sometimes it's like, how do you, like, we have all these wonderful, what we just talked about, these 5 steps, but it's like, what do you actually do? Like, what do you actually say? Like, how do you actually, stand your own 2 feet,
Yeah,
in order to do this? Because it could be very, very intimidating,
sure.
to
I mean,
kind of
that's the
make a
reason you're
request
still
like
in the
that.
relationship, right?
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
that's the reason you're still in it, is most of the time your own fear or
Hmm.
intimidation. So having that smart request,
Hmm.
and having some type of, basically it's an instruction manual, right, of how
Exactly.
to talk with someone and make
Yeah.
the request without offending or putting them on the defensive.
Yeah.
I think that's fantastic. I love it. Great
Yeah,
tool.
yeah. We have like, yeah, we got a little more time, not too much time, but yeah. So how about, and I don't know what's going on with your mic, John. It's a little, or not the mic. I think there's some sort of interference somewhere, but I don't
Okay,
know if
check.
that's going to make a difference, but it's okay. So, and sorry, everybody out there that's listening, John didn't do a goddamn thing. All of a sudden it just started happening. So who knows?
Oh
Anyway,
man, you're being
so,
so toxic.
oh fuck, dude. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I mean, I'm not shit, dude. Now
Just
I
kidding.
feel like I'm being an asshole. Okay, so let's talk about toxic relationships at work, and this is from Forbes magazine. So just to make it, so personal relationships are one thing, and they can be, they have their own challenges and their own gifts as well. But at work, if you're in a toxic relationship, um, this is like what they had written, or what, like, these, I don't know how many, 7 or 8 here, is like, calmly speak up. Like, if somebody, your boss or your coworker, is like, bullying you in some way. They talk about bullying in the office. It's like, it's still like, I think, I know this in high school, but Forbes goes on to quote, it's like 27% of people in the office are experiencing bullies, and toxic relationships of bullying in the fucking office. So calmly speak up, right? Is it calmly, I think, is key here, right? If another option is connect with your manager, be like, hey, I'm having trouble with this person, that, whatever. Connect with your manager. Set boundaries. It could be like, if that toxic person is coming your way, and either have a meeting or whatever, or something, or asking for your time. It's like, I only got 15 minutes, or I only communicate with me through email, or only this, or something like that. So, this is another one. Don't counter gossip, because then you're just creating more toxicity in the office.
Then you're being toxic yourself.
You're being toxic yourself, right? And it's like, I learned that, John. Oh, I got fired from a yoga studio when I first started out years ago. And I didn't like this. I just tell this story quick. I was teaching at, it's like the second studio I ever taught at. And I just didn't like the way the owners were conducting their business. They would come in, to take this is the one thing, this is what really pissed me off, and realize, like, who the fuck are these people? Why are they treating us this way? So if they wanted to come in and teach one of their class, they didn't live in New York, they lived somewhere else, but they would just drop in, and I'm going to teach, like, 2 Saturday classes or something like that. They would take the class away from the teacher without compensating them at all. They would just take it away.
Wow.
Which is like, I would think, like, well, give them, giving them their fucking money if you're taking their class or something. Like, they work for you, show them a little respect. So this is like, developed toxic feelings for this particular woman.
Yeah.
And, and she wrote a book called something like, Your Best Life Ever, or something like that. And it was just like, I read a few pages. I'm like, oh my God, this is just a rambling, unedited fucking, I was like, wow. Like, I know I'm judging right now as well. And I was just like, wow. I was like, I just couldn't believe it.
You're aware of it.
Yeah, I'm being aware. But I was also getting clued in through her writing about what she's all about. And it was just so much about, there's a lot of expressed narcissism in a book, and how I should live a life like hers. But, I'm seeing how she lives her life, and she's taking away classes from teachers and shit.
Yeah.
So, and she was all about promoting her book at the studio and this and that. And it was just like, oh my God. Like, I don't think she has a lot of value in this book. And I don't think we should really be promoting this book, but it's her studio. And the one day I was talking, I gossiped. I fucking was gossiping to another teacher. A student overheard me talking about this woman and my feelings about her book. And then the next day I get called by the manager, and I got freaking fired, right? Because of the gossip. I owned up to the gossip, and said, I'm sorry, explained myself. I think in the way I just explained about, how she was, I was very unsatisfied with her taking classes away from myself and other teachers just because she wanted to teach because she was in town. And I got fired from that situation. So I don't know, that was gossip. Like,
gossip.
I was like, from that moment, I was like, do not gossip. Do not talk shit behind people's back. Don't, just don't gossip, because it's never good. It always creates toxicity with you. It brings up those feelings. You might do it more often, and then, then people might like, oh, Will likes the gossip or this or that. And they're gossiping about me, and they're gossiping in their own life. So it just is not good. It's very,
don't
evil
also,
social
like,
contagion. Yeah.
Don't listen to gossip, right? So yes, don't actively gossip yourself, but also don't listen to it, because a lot of the time, if you're listening to it, then you're feeding into it. And then a lot of the time, if you're listening to it, if someone is gossiping to you about someone else, there's a good chance, and I think I've said this on the show before, there's a good chance that same person is gossiping to someone else about you. So don't put up with it.
Yeah. Don't overshare. That's another thing. So, like, you don't have to share all your ideas, especially with a toxic person, because they might use them against you. So don't overshare. Realize your audience is really important. I was going back and reading The Artist's Way, trying to get a little bit deeper into relationships and stuff. And it's like, she talks about, you value the people that are in the dugout with you and people that are outside of your dugout. People inside are people that you can trust and love, and they can hold your word and not going to gossip. They hold you to your highest esteem, but also don't let you get away with bullshit. People outside that, you have to identify what those people are. They might try to, hijack you in some ways, or do something bad. Confront them. They also have here, like, confront them in some ways, and use that little script, use that little smart request. And let them know that you're triggered in a certain way, and when and how. So it's very clear. celebrate individualism. So this is a way to combat bigotry. If somebody is like, oh, they mentioned like in a millennial example here, it's like, oh, well, that person's a millennial, so they don't know this, that, and the other thing because of whatever, they're millennial. So celebrate individualism in the office, because it's really what makes a corporation thrive, and this is where our country thrive in a lot of ways. And this, our city, I live in New York, is the individualism and the and then don't conform, to the toxicity, to the behavior, to any thing that does not align with your values. I think is a good way to probably put that. And then document and follow up. So if and you can talk to your manager in some ways, and not trying to get this guy fired or whatever. I mean, that's not the point. Like, if this person is being an asshole, then if he's been an asshole to you, then where else is he being an asshole? So
right, exactly.
Yeah,
exactly.
Cool.
Good stuff, man. And unfortunately, I do have to roll like we've covered before. We are cutting this show a little bit short. There's more here, and we want to be a resource for you. We may do another follow-up show on toxic relationships, but this is all, unfortunately, that we can afford to do at this time. So that said, we'll do a quick closing practice and wrap it up in a nice bow for you guys. Will, you want to do a quick closing practice?
Awesome. Let's just do 3 breaths, everybody, to get into that calm and peaceful place. Exhale out. Big inhale through the nose. Exhale out very softly and slow. Bigger breath in. Let it go. One more. Okay, let it go. And just those breaths will help you to relax your mind, relax your body, get into that clear space, and also help to eliminate some of the fuel that might be fueling the toxicity and the rage that comes with toxicity. So thank you, John. Beautiful.
Thank you, brother.
Once again, always a pleasure to be here, and always a pleasure to help our audience. And let us know how we're doing out there. Leave us a comment, maybe take a screenshot on your of the episode right now and post it on your social media and say, we appreciate and love what Men Talking Mindfulness are doing. And tag us at Men Talking Mindfulness.
That would be awesome. Guys. Thank you all. Until next time. Peace.
Joining us today. We hope you walk away with some new tools and insights to guide you on your life journey. New episodes are being published every week, so please join us again for some meaningful discussion. For more information, please check out mentalkingmindfulness.com.